Good morning and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this morning it is my privilege to introduce to you Ned Staebler. We're going to talk about Election Day, what he saw last year on Election Day, and we're also going to talk about January 6th. Good morning, Ned. How are you?
Good morning, Kim. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm great. So let's get right to it. So last year on Election Day, when we all were voting for the next president of the United States, you were in downtown Detroit in the midst of counting the ballots. Can you
Yes.
tell us what it was like on that day?
So actually 2 days I was down there. The first day on election day itself, I was working at various polls just to make sure everything was moving smoothly and there weren't problems. And sure enough, it was actually very smooth, especially given challenges we've had in the past. It was one of the easiest election days I've ever seen. Now, part of that is what feeds into the national story is that there were so many absentee ballots and so many people were voting that way. So there weren't long lines at polling places, et cetera. And of course, the Michigan legislature had decided that clerks weren't allowed to count ballots before election day, even though we knew there was going to be a record number of these absentee ballots because of the pandemic. And so by the second day after election day, the day after election day, the second day, they were still down at Cope TCF. That changed again now. I think Huntington. I don't know what it's going
Yeah,
to be called.
it's Huntington now, from what I heard the last report.
Every week it's something new. I'm glad it's not Cobo anymore. But I was down at the big convention center downtown,
Yeah.
and they were still counting all these absentee ballots. And it turned into what we all saw on the news as an absolute I won't say mayhem, but there was definitely an element of mayhem. Certainly outside the room, there was mayhem.
And so when you say mayhem, describe what that is, because what we saw on the news were people shouting and people protesting and people trying to get in with the people that were actually doing the tabulating and the counting. We heard stories about people feeding absentee ballots 10 times, for
Right, right.
the same, all those different things. Can you tell us what that was like?
Sure.
And,
Let me set the scene a little bit. So inside one of the big rooms where they're, big enough to run the auto show,
mhm.
they had set up a tabulation room with 143, I think, tables, each big enough to hold 10 or 12 people. I mean, this is a big room, right? So you've got 1,500 or so poll workers in there who were their job was essentially to take these absentee ballots, make sure that signatures match, et cetera, et cetera. They were in the poll book, like if it's Kim B. Davis, Kim B. Davis voted, okay, great, and then run it through the machine and make sure the votes got tabulated. It sounds easy peasy, right? But they were having to do it for I guess I'm trying to remember off the top of my head now. I want to say about 160,000 absentee votes, whereas 4 years ago they only had to do it for about 50,000 votes. It was like 4 times as many that they had to do, and so there was a lot of it. And of course, these ballots, there's always some little problem, right? We all filled out those Scantron forms when we were in school back in the day.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't fill in the bubble just well enough, so it can't be read by the machine. Or maybe it got a little crumpled up and when you folded it up and put it in the envelope and mailed it back. Or here's a common one that that I didn't know really was a thing, but apparently it's a big thing. We call it husband and wife. Well, your husband and wife are both voting absentee, or 2 members of the same household are voting absentee, and they take their ballots out of the envelopes and they work on them together or separate, whatever. Then they put them back sometimes in the opposite envelope. So I put mine in yours, you put yours in mine, and we mail them in so the name doesn't match the ballot, but we got them both right there, right? And the courts have said we want to make sure that we err on the side of people voting. So if it's that easy to see that Mr. Davis and Mrs. Davis, well, did it? We should flip those back and let them vote, right? So there's what seems like such an easy little thing turns into a very complicated process, and it needs a lot of manual oversight because you can't, no machine. I know cars are going to drive us around and they're going to think for us soon, but they're not quite there yet. You need someone, a sentient human being, to look at it and go, no, this was the intent, let's fix it. And of course, we want all of that to be nonpartisan. We want no one doing anything untoward to benefit one party. So there are all these rules in place. Like at any one of these tables, there can be a representative of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, an independent. All these various people can get credentialed to go and watch at each of these tables. And then there can be a certain amount of lawyers in the room. And then when ballots are in dispute, so let's just say at the table, they can't figure it out for whatever reason. They feed it through the machine and it doesn't work. So they feed it through again and it doesn't work. They mark problem ballot on it and they put it in a box and they all get taken over to another place to be further adjudicated, right? And at those places, you got a Republican watching and a Democrat watching, an independent watching, just to make sure that they're in agreement. Sometimes the ballots are crumpled up and they have to re-put them, transfer them over to a clean ballot. Okay. For example, here's one. All of the overseas ballots, like from the military that come in, for some reason, they were printed, it's probably a vendor error, on ballots that were slightly the wrong size.
Oh, wow.
So they wouldn't feed through the machine. So they had to hand transfer every one of those 8,000 or so ballots in Detroit. And when you're transferring, you have to have a Republican there and a Democrat there, an independent, so that we can make sure no one's just like, cheating, right? Okay. So all of that is going on in this room. You've got 1,500 election workers. You've got 150 challengers from the Democrats and 150 challengers from the Republicans and 100, independents. So we're now close to 2,000 people in this little room. Oh yeah, and we got COVID. So people are wearing masks and we're trying to stay socially distanced, but you're also trying to look over the shoulder of somebody who's working on something. It's I won't say it's chaos because there is an order to it. And there's rules and all of that. But it's a crowded scene to begin with. Okay. And then what caused what I described as mayhem was that some of the folks in that room were not there to make sure there was an orderly process happening. Some of the folks, and I'm blunt, you're going to get radical honesty from me.
Please.
The Republican challengers who were there to slow the process down. They were there to cause problems. They were there to say there was fraud. They were there to cast doubt on everything that was happening in that room. That's how they had been instructed. And at various times during the day, we heard them be instructed by sort of the team leaders of the Republicans, be more aggressive, challenge more, complain more. And so they did. And it was a horrible dynamic for so many reasons. One, you've got these people that are working real hard and doing a good job trying to be fair, getting accosted. Secondly, you've got a dynamic of race. So the vast majority of the people working were Black residents of the city of Detroit. The vast majority of the Republican challengers were white suburbanites who were, in which we frequently ask them, why are you doing this here? Why aren't you in your own community? Why aren't you in a suburb, raising these claims of fraud? And we all know the reason for that, because it's easier. People believe it more if it's in Detroit and Black people are doing the counting. It's easier to play into the public sort of perception that there must be some fraud going on there. So all of this is going on in this room, and it's getting very tense because people inside the room are starting to get reports of how the vote tallies are going. And we know that when we woke up that morning, Donald Trump was ahead because they counted the non-absentee votes, the in-person votes right away. And the so-called red mirage had happened and he was ahead, but we still had hundreds of thousands of votes, largely from places like Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids that were voting heavily Democratic still to count. In fact, when I woke up that morning, I had done something. Kim, I'm going to toot my own horn.
Okay.
I did the smartest thing I did all last year was I got home from working at those polls at like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I ate some food and I turned off my phone and I went to bed.
Very good.
I did not watch election returns. I did not stay up till 1 a.m. and that stuff. I did wake up at 3:30 or 4 and check my phone to see, okay, where are we?
Right.
And it was like, oh, I don't know how this is going. And then I realized that was a few hours old and I found new stuff and I said, oh, Biden's going to win. he was way behind in a lot of votes.
In a
But
lot of
when you
places.
when you saw where the votes were still remaining, I'm like, we're gonna win. Oh my, this is great. So by the time I got down there, Biden was still behind, but we knew we still had a couple 100,000 votes in Detroit and Grand Rapids and Flint to count, and he was only down by like 50,000 votes. So we knew he was going to end up being ahead by what turned out to be close to 150,000 votes. So, and as that voting total kept going up, they got more aggressive as Biden caught up, if you will, and eventually passed by 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. He was ahead. And it's really interesting because they were outside screaming, "Stop the count." Yeah. I remember at one point thinking, if we stop right now, Biden wins, right? Because he's already be careful what you wish for.
Right.
Yeah. So at one point during the day, the fire marshal or someone said, "There's too many people in this room." Because they were doing a good job of making sure everyone coming in was credentialed, but they weren't doing a good job of counting how many people were leaving. So they were basically just letting people in. And at some point we realized there were way more than 150 Republicans and 150 Democrats in the room. Okay. And so someone at the front said, no more. No more observers can come in because we already have way more than we're supposed to have in here. And, with COVID, it's hard. That's when all hell broke loose because Republicans had gone out to get lunch or whatever, and they came back and weren't allowed to come back in the room. And they filed lawsuits. They made a big stink about you're denying our rights because you must be cheating in there.
Right.
Let me say, there was no cheating going on. There was absolutely nothing wrong. There was no 150,000 ballots that arrived in the middle of the night that all voted for Joe Biden. The reality is, if you look at the numbers, Donald Trump did better in the city of Detroit in 2020 than he did in 2016.
Wow. Really?
I'm shocked by that, but
yes, I am too.
he legitimately did. Biden got just about the same amount of votes that Hillary got in 2016, and Trump got a few thousand more. So he actually did better by a couple percent in the city of Detroit. Which is part of why we, in the aftermath, we were like, why are you focusing on what happened in Detroit? Trump did well there. Why don't you go out to Oakland County where he got killed relative to 2016?
Exactly.
So that was what happened sort of during the day there.
So I'm glad that you said that there was no fraud, because that was going to be my next question. Based on what you saw, did you believe that there was any fraud? And you answered that question. And I know because it was front page news, we saw the person who was literally had her hands up like, no more people in this room. We're shutting it down. It's a fair process. It's interesting that you say that Detroit, or that Donald Trump did better in Detroit in 2020 than he did in 2016, which is interesting. But moving forward, did you see the response that you saw outside, the vigorous response from the protesters? Would you, on election day or the day after election day, have thought that January 6th could have happened?
No. Well, boy, I said that quickly, didn't I? Caught myself. I mean, so let's describe what they were doing. They were banging on the walls.
Yes.
Here is a group of predominantly white, 99% white, protesters. I don't know if any of them were armed. I was not, believe me, I was not inquiring to that fact. I did not see weapons being brandished in some way. I do know that the people out there were trying to film inside the room. The room we were in just happened to have windows. It's not required to have windows or anything like that. It just happened to have windows. And they were taking pictures in. And one of the people, one of the workers was worried that someone had just taken their picture and it was going to end up on social media. And they were going to get doxxed and their family was going to be threatened. And so the staff began covering up the windows with paper or some newspaper maybe. And that of course sparked a whole nother, what are you doing in there? You must be doing illegal things if you won't let us watch. They were chanting, they were banging, they were physical. It was a little scary to be inside the room. Now, I mean, Detroit police were there. I will say Detroit police did not respond in the way I watched them respond all summer to BLM activists. they were far friendlier and gentler
Mhm.
than I have seen that. I mean, I personally had friends that had gotten maced or tear gassed or whatever it is, and
Mhm.
had gotten choked by police officers for stepping off the sidewalk and doing things, minor
Wow.
thing.
Mhm.
And I know there's a series of lawsuits going on there, but
Mhm.
the police I thought were very respectful. And I'm not saying everyone should be treated more worse. I think everybody should be treated better by the police.
Right.
But it was a scary situation to be in. So if you ask, do I think then that, January 6th could have happened? The answer is yeah, because you can see the level of, we did this and there were no negative repercussions for it. So
Mhm.
now let's do a little bit more and there are no negative repercussions. And again, I'm not asking you to beat them. I'm not asking you to whatever,
Mhm.
but clearing them out so that we all felt safety, which they eventually did. They created a perimeter, but it took
Right.
hours around the building so that some of that diffused. Um, but January 6th is a whole nother level.
It is. It is. So I want to stop you because I'm going to put a pin in it because I forgot. We got to talk about what happened in Michigan's capital in Lansing, because I believe that that was a dress rehearsal for our nation's capital. We saw people do the same thing, bully, push themselves in. However, the difference is that they had weapons
Mhm.
and walked into the legislative chambers where our elected officials sit and do the work of the people, and stood over them with guns. And I know a few legislators, and I was listening to them, and they were talking about how they had to go to work today to do the work of the people in bulletproof vests. And I thought, wow, this is horrible. Why, and it's easy to say, how did we get here? And I know that you know how we got here, and I know how we got here. A lot
It's
of
easy
other
not only
people.
to say it, it's easy to answer it too.
um, but I also want to go back to something, and I want you to explain. I know what it is. When you say, is it docked or doxed?
Doxxed, doxed.
Doxed. Explain what doxed is.
So doxed means that people put a picture of you or your name, and they give out personal information like your address, your phone number, your email, and then people show up at your house or send you things or email or call you to harass you or threaten you.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was a thing. I didn't realize how common a thing it was until it happened to me
Mm-hmm.
about 2 weeks after this day, 20 days after, to be
Mm-hmm.
exact. So maybe that's a good segue into what happened next.
So talk about that, because you shared experiences, because you did some interviews that have gone national that people have talked about. Is that part of the reason that you believe that you were doxxed?
So on the way the process works, and this is fascinating. I don't think most of us knew anything about this process
Mm-hmm.
before November. We just thought, okay, you voted, they counted it up, and that was it, right? But so
Right.
the way it works is there are individual election boards in every county in Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all by law, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really perfunctory. All they do is they listen to staff, and the staff's like, okay, this was the count, and we had a few ballots that we couldn't quite reconcile yet. We've been working on it, but we'll get there. But it's only a few, so no big deal. There was 800,000, 880,000 in Wayne County, and we can't figure out these 300 ballots yet. But it's not that big a deal. We counted them, but they're not adding up right because of Mr. and Mrs. Davis or whatever it might be. We haven't had time to go back and figure them all out yet. But the board of each of these board of canvassers is what they're called, are meant to then just certify them and say, yep. And they can put notes in. Oh, there were 300 votes that we need to clean up, or next time we should allow people to count their absentee ballots before the election day so we can get counting and things like that. But then they certify. Well, 20 days after the election, which is the law,
Mm-hmm.
Wayne County met to certify the election, the results.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it over Zoom, although there were some people in the room, but largely it was by Zoom. And we got word that as part of the national campaign waged by the Trump administration to discredit this election,
Mm-hmm.
claiming there was fraud, that these Republicans on this board of canvassers were not going to certify the votes from the election.
And that was partisan, correct?
completely. So there's 2 and 2, but you need 3 out of the 4, because you got to have a majority. And that's how they're set up, right? But there's no legal thing other than voting to certify. There's nothing else they can do. They don't have any power to investigate. They don't have anything. All they can do is certify. And there's a lot of question about what happens if they don't certify, because it doesn't happen. But we got word that they were going to not certify. So we got a bunch of us got on a Zoom. 300 people got on instantly. It filled up with 100. They had to go off and buy a bigger subscription to Zoom. And so 300 of us got on. And then they talked. And the 4 commissioners and staff talked for 3 or 4 hours. While many of us sat there and did our work or email or whatever while sitting there on a Zoom. After 3 or 4 hours, they decided to vote. And they decided not to certify the election. Now, this is, as I said before, unprecedented. This doesn't happen, right? But let's talk about the rationale. So the 2 Democrats said, look, there were a lot fewer problems there were in August, and you certified then. There were fewer problems in August than there were 4 years ago, and you certified then. So what's the problem now exactly? Well, we just don't feel comfortable, blah, blah, blah. There were levels of uncertainty related to ballots in Detroit that we don't feel comfortable about. Well, staff said, actually, there are more problems in Livonia than there were in Detroit.
Right.
So I don't understand. And the folks said, well, we'll certify the whole county except for Detroit. And there's no reason for that, clearly. But they voted not to certify. And then the next item on the agenda, the only thing left, is public comment. And you should have seen 300 hands on Zoom go up.
I bet.
So we started giving public comment, and it was really frustrating because the 2 Republicans who were running the committee were also choosing the people to speak. And they chose people with the whitest names that you could imagine. And you should see the comments in chat from other people. They're saying, hey, when are you going to pick some Black people? When are you going to pick Detroiters? When are you going to, blah, blah, blah. Well, they made the mistake of thinking that Ned Staebler, which is a white name, I'm a white guy, was going to be just another white person saying, good job, guys. And I didn't. I called them out for exactly what they had just done. They had just disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of Black voters in the city of Detroit without any reason. Livonia, a city of 95% white people, they were willing to certify when it had more errors than Detroit, a city of 82% Black people. We knew exactly what that was. It was racism. And I told them that in no uncertain terms that their names were going to go down in history along with Bull Connor and George Wallace and other famous racists, and that their grandkids would think about them like that. And after that, the dam kind of broke. So the next person they called on was Wendell Anthony. Woo! I thought I had done pretty well. He made me look like a third-rate high school debater because he laid into him with some fire. And after that, it was like, the dam had broken, and person after person after person said, you are a racist, what you've just done is wrong, blah, 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 blah. So it was pretty amazing what happened then. If someone clipped a video of me talking and put it on Twitter, within 24 hours, it had 10 million views. And I was getting calls from The Daily Show and Joy Reid and all these people to do stuff. And it seemed pretty cool at first. And then my phone started ringing with people telling me they were going to kill me.
Wow.
And it took me a little while to figure out what happened, but I had been doxxed. That is, my picture was showing up all over the internet, or this clip was, with my phone number, my email, my address, all that kind of thing. And they were accusing me of having threatened these folks, the Republican commissioners. Now, I'd only threatened them with a legacy known as racism, and said that, you're going to meet your maker at some point. And I told them it was going to get kind of warm for their souls. I don't have the power to damn anyone. Like, I wish I did. That'd be kind of cool, but I don't, right? I don't have the power. I was just telling them about what history was going to think about. I didn't threaten them or their kids, or I don't know where they live. I wasn't going to send anyone to their house. But yet that's exactly what they did to me, is that they told people, call this person, go to his house, threaten him, et cetera, et cetera. So I started getting hundreds and then thousands of phone calls, emails, Twitter posts, Facebook direct messages, and then eventually mail. They sent pizza to my house that they didn't pay for. I
Oh,
got
wow, really?
packages of, like it's 1986 or something, you know. I got packages of poop mailed to me,
Mm,
sex toys, all kinds of stuff. They're weird things that people would say, nooses, you know, all the good stuff. Because I had stood up and defended our democracy against obvious racism.
mhm. Well, Ned, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. I'm glad that you're safe, and I know that you took precautions to do what you needed to do. It's very sad to see that we are here at this day. But let's move forward and talk about January 6th. Tell me some things that you saw on January 6th. Was there anything that you saw that surprised you?
I was surprised how little police presence there was. I was surprised how there was no National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I, we've been hearing for a month, you know, Trump had said, come January 6th, it'll be wild.
Mm-hmm.
He had said, this is a fraud. We need to fight and take back our democracy. And you watched Howley, Mo Brooks, you know, a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
these kooks,
Yes.
I'll say, these kooks were inciting the mob. You know, the day before, Ted Cruz is standing on a car telling them to fight, and he'll be shoulder to shoulder with them. I'll
Mm-hmm.
note he was not, because he's a coward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so that didn't surprise me. That they showed up with guns didn't surprise me, because we saw it, as you said, as you mentioned, we saw it in Lansing, and frankly, we see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They feel guns are important parts of their protest. I would point out that there's a definition of terrorism,
Mm-hmm.
and that is attempting to get political means through violence or the threat of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need your gun if you're not there to try and threaten violence or show your, you know, strength for intimidation purposes? That's terrorism. That's, by definition, it's terrorism.
Exactly.
So that didn't surprise me. I was shocked that they weren't immediately tear gassed, told to disperse, and that the National Guard didn't show up. And then once they were in the building, I was absolutely shocked they didn't surround the building. That the
Yeah.
National Guard didn't surround the building and say, "Okay, if you'd like to come out, you can do so here. We'll be collecting your firearms. We'll be taking your driver's license information.
Exactly.
We'll be
Taking
fingerprinting
you
you
right
on the
to
way
jail.
out."
Yeah, right.
I was shocked that they were just let to go home and sleep in their own beds that night. Although, if you look at after, you know, Rittenhouse in Kenosha,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, you
Mhm.
know, I guess I shouldn't have been as shocked as I was by it.
Don't feel bad, Ned. You know, as an African American, I was talking with friends and was shocked by what I was seeing. Um, the gentleman, I believe his name is Eugene Brown, I was screaming at the TV because we were watching it live, and I said, "Those people are going to kill him." And I, you know, was very angry, but at the same time, we've seen this for decades. Decades. My grandparents saw it, my great grandparents saw it, and so on and so on. But I want to ask you, because you brought up Holly, and you know the new elected representative from West Virginia, Evans. These are people who supported and stoked this along with the president of the United States. What I want to see him gone, and I know that there's a process to doing that, but what do you, from your political expertise, see actually happening to them outside of just being minimized? Because we've all heard that they're going to be minimized. You know, they'll be probably taken off their committees, and their power will be relinquished. However, they still have that position, and that is still a dangerous place for them to be.
So I think we're all in a very dangerous time, because I want to be very clear with what I think actually happened on January 6th.
Okay.
It was not a protest. It was
Okay.
not a riot.
Hmm.
It was a coup. It was
Hmm.
an attempt to violently overthrow the government of the United States.
Hmm.
Not every single person who was there was a part of the planning of it. I
Yes.
get that.
Hmm.
But there was certainly a very core group of people that had as their mission the capture and execution of our elected leaders.
Yes.
And we have them on video inside the Senate chamber saying, "Where is everybody? Where is Pelosi? Where is
Mhm.
Pence? We need to get the." They chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," as
Yes.
they erected a gallows,
Mhm.
stormed the building chanting, "Hang Mike Pence."
Mhm.
That's a coup,
Yeah.
right? And so, for those, you know, we're at this dangerous time, because how a government responds to it to an attempt to overthrow it is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know everyone's going to say, well, stop saying Hitler, stop saying Hitler. But Hitler tried a coup before he successfully took over the country,
Yes, he
the
did.
Beer Hall Putsch. And
Yes.
he was arrested and
Mm-hmm.
sentenced to jail for 10 years, but he got out after like 8 months. Why? Because we didn't want to upset his supporters anymore. We
Right.
wanted to appease them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're already seeing parallels. Is
Mm-hmm.
that on January 7th, people started saying, well, let's just move on, you
Right.
know, in the sake of unity.
Mm-hmm.
That's very dangerous
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't see any repercussion after Michigan.
Yes.
So now they're doing it in January 6th. If they don't see any repercussion after that, they'll be back
Mm-hmm.
and it will be worse. Imagine if Joe Biden won this election by a lot. He won by 8 million votes. He won by 70 electoral college votes, whatever it is. What if it was close?
Right.
What if one state held the difference? What if it was Michigan? What if it was, you
Mm-hmm.
know, Georgia was the only state and it was,
I-
you know, it was 15,000 votes like Florida in
Mhm.
2000?
Mhm.
What if they stormed that place with guns and took the ballots?
Right.
How hard would that be?
Mm-hmm.
So we're very close, and how we respond is very important. So we need our leaders, especially the Democratic leaders who have the moral upper hand right now, and starting Wednesday, I believe,
Yes.
control over both houses of Congress, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
They need to step up and say, no, this was a coup. We're going to call things what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we have laws about sedition and seditious conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Folks that were found to be a part of that, and my guess is there'll be 1,000, including those elected leaders like Holly and Brooks and Evans and those crew.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be held accountable. They need to get charged. They need
Mm-hmm.
to be put in prison, and they need not to be let out in 6 months for unity. That's my opinion. Nobody voted for me. I'm not in charge. But if I were king for a day, that's what I would do.
Ned, I wholeheartedly agree with you because there are some dangerous parallels. And we don't even have to just look at Hitler. We can look at Mussolini and what Mussolini did in Italy. And that there are some dangerous parallels with him and Trump as well. You've also mentioned about moving forward. And I love to read your posts, by the way, because they give me hope that there are sane people in the world. Because, you know, when you watch the news and you see these things, you're like, there are so many of them.
Yeah.
Really, that's what's scary. And the fact that after, and I'm moving a little bit, but when you look at them and you see that they are firefighters, that they're police officers, that they're doctors, that they're teachers, that they are people that are all around us in important positions in society. You know, if you're a teacher and you're teaching in a predominantly African American school district, what are you teaching my kids? I'm concerned now. You're my doctor. And as a black person in this country, most black people will tell you when we go to the doctor, especially as women, your concerns are not always listened to. People think that, you know, there was a study in the Journal of American or the American Journal of Medicine that said that new residents still have these beliefs that Black people have stronger nerve endings and tougher
Right.
skin, so we don't feel pain, and we know that is something that is harkens back to slavery. I say that to say that these are the people that are storming our capitals, and these are the people that sometimes continue to push these narratives forward, and we all suffer. You had mentioned funding, and we know that for anyone that's running for office, you need money. And you talked about cutting off, and we see it now with companies cutting off support. Should there be more? Are we on track where we should be based on what you think?
So I don't know what the right number is.
Mm-hmm.
I know that um, were I in charge of a company's political giving, I
Mm-hmm.
would never give another dime to any of the people that signed on to try to overturn the election or any of these folks that incited the events of the coup on January 6th. Um, is it enough? I don't know. How long will it last? I'm skeptical. You know, I could see a company saying, fine, I'm not going to give you any money. And then 3 months from now, when they need something, going back and saying, well, I'm not going to give you any money unless you do what I need, which of course is illegal. But you know, the cynic in me says that's the kind of thing that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I 100% think that, frankly, we should get money out of politics.
I agree.
I don't think any good comes from that. I understand the court says it's speech, but I don't understand why a rich person has more speech than a poor person. That does not make any sense to me. But again, not on the Supreme Court, so I don't get a say in this. I would hope it would continue and, frankly, keep going more in the other direction, that people would mobilize and say, let's look. So if Hawley, if Cruz, if these guys don't get kicked out, we would say, who's giving them money? Verizon or Amazon or whoever, and actually try to put, use the power of the free market to say, fine, we're not going to stay in a Marriott hotel. And no offense to anyone at Marriott, I don't know if you're giving money or not, but we're not going to buy Coca-Cola if you're continuing to contribute to people like this. And so I would hope it would continue, because it to some extent, power is the only thing these folks understand. So we need to fight fire with fire a little bit.
And you're right. This is where mobilization and community strength and support come in. Things that we care about, things that we're passionate about, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's about people financing particular candidates, we need to support those companies that take care of our interests and that listen to us. Those that don't, we need to show them our support by not shopping with them or utilizing their services. Yep. So now I want to switch gears, because this is a question that I've been asking people and just thinking about it. So January 20th is coming. I know, can't wait. So excited. And so Donald Trump will no longer be president. Do you still feel that after he has left the White House, that he will still be dangerous based on his mythology, and based on his level of influence, and based on his continued support from people that support him?
Complicated question.
Yes.
So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. So the rumor is that on January 19th, he's going to pardon himself and 100 other people, including all of his family members. Of course, pardons only work retroactively. You can't pardon yourself. You can't. There's a lot of debate whether you can pardon yourself in the first place.
I've heard that.
We'll see about that. But you can't pardon someone else from anything they do in the future.
Right.
You also can't pardon them from state crimes. So we'll see what happens to his family and to him at local levels in the states like New York, and even now in Georgia and places like that. So there is that. It is important to recognize, and I think most people do, Trump is not the cause of many of these problems. Trump is more of a symptom in that regard, in that it's not like he invented racism and misogyny and bigotry, but he was brought to the forefront because so many, especially white male Americans, feel like something has been taken away from them. The power to call people and do people whatever they want has been taken away from. Yes, they are right. You can't be openly racist as easily anymore. So, but he certainly stoked it, right? So it's a vicious cycle where they bring him in because they appreciate his racism. He throws red meat to his base, and it makes it acceptable again. More acceptable. It's coming out of the shadows a little bit more. So I think he loses that second part of the bully pulpit, right? I think you've already seen he's been kicked off Twitter and Facebook and some of those things. I don't think that changes. I think his influence, his ability to use the bully pulpit, one of the more powerful weapons that the president has, that's gone.
Okay.
I think it's possible he'll still have some, because he has this sway over his base. And he's going to start up his own TV network or something like that, because frankly, I think that was always his goal, was to figure out how he could get more money from these rubes. And he's still going to have sway over a big chunk of the Republican base. So you have more modern or traditional Republican politicians who need to cater to him so that they don't lose those folks that are going to come out and vote. I don't know if they can hold that coalition together, frankly, when he's not the president anymore. My crystal ball is foggy on that one. And so it's possible that the entire Republican Party fractures over this. Is that you've got enough people saying, well, he's gone, and frankly, I don't want to be associated with these crazy people anymore. And you've got enough of the crazy people saying, well, now they're disavowing me after all I did for them. I don't want to be a part of the Republicans anymore. And you don't need that many on both of those fronts
Mhm.
to carve them into a permanent minority
Mhm.
when people are already too embarrassed to say they're a Republican in public. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
It is interesting. I do think he's going to start his own television network. I think he also is going to start something like a Twitter or something where he can actually control it and use his own power to speak to people. But I liken it to, and don't laugh at me, Ned. I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
All
And
right.
so, uh, are you familiar with Star Wars?
I mean, yeah, of course.
So one of the later movies is called The Force Awakens, and you have a character called Kylo Ren. And Kylo Ren is, and I hate to say it because I'm giving it away, but he's the grandson of Darth Vader.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler.
Spoiler alert, sorry if you haven't seen it, it's a spoiler alert. But there's a scene where he has his helmet on like his grandfather, and he's talking to him, trying to be like him. And I just wonder who the next person will be who will look at Donald Trump and go, he had it. Now, how do we perfect this? And I think that's when you talk about Hitler after 10 years coming back, we have to be vigilant because this isn't going away. And like you said, we do live in very dangerous times.
That's a great point. And we talk a lot about that, whether his children will try to pick up the mantle.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. We'll see how that works. I don't know if any of them can be, the myth of Donald Trump, the self-made billionaire, which is a
Mhm.
myth,
Yes.
uh, was really strong. I don't think his kids have that same
Hmm. I
uh,
agree.
myth because they weren't on The Apprentice for all those years, and frankly, it's harder to say the son of a self-made billionaire is a self-made billionaire,
Right.
even if none of them are billionaires. But
Mhm.
so I don't know if they can pull it off in the same way. They're certainly going to try because sort of like the force is strong in this one, the grift is strong in this one.
Yes.
They only
I
know
like
one
how you
way to
did.
make money, and that is by taking advantage of suckers.
Yeah.
So they will be back.
Yes, they will. I like how you did that, Ned. So,
Mhm.
last question. What are you hopeful for with a Biden Harris upcoming administration?
Oh,
Talk
well,
about happy things.
the trite answer is I'm just looking forward to next week when I can wake up without worrying that the president started a world war over Twitter. But that's trite. I, I'm optimistic that we're finally going to have a federal government with a plan to end the COVID epidemic,
Yes.
which for a year now
Mhm.
we haven't had, and it's we've lost 400,000 Americans
Mhm.
unnecessarily
Mhm.
because of this, because our federal government didn't have a plan. The
Mhm.
economy uh, is in real peril, and I
Mhm.
know that people say, "Oh, the stock market's at record highs," but stock market has nothing to do with the economy. Let's just be clear with that.
Mhm.
Small businesses are the lifeblood of the economy. The GDP is a measure of the economy. Both of those are getting killed.
Mhm.
There's 30% fewer small business locations open than there were a year ago. Uh,
Wow.
that's a huge problem,
Mm.
especially in places like Detroit.
Mhm.
So I'm optimistic that we're going to end the COVID epidemic. We're going to have a massive stimulus designed at the grassroots level to do
Mhm.
a bottom up uh, revitalization effort, one
Mhm.
that's going to be inclusive and equitable and make sure that everyone gets to participate in the
Mhm.
recovery. It won't be as good as it could be
Mhm.
as part of making the sausage,
Yes.
but I think with Biden Harris and the really professional people they're bringing in
Mhm.
around them,
Mhm.
uh, we're going to start from that premise, and we might give up a little bit as opposed to starting from big checks to billionaires in boardrooms, and we got to play along for some scraps. So I think 21, fingers crossed,
Mhm.
knock on wood. I think 21 is going to be a better year.
That is a great way to end our show, Ned Stabler. Thank you so much for being on the Kim B. Davis show. I hope that you'll come back because this has been a fascinating conversation.
Next time something fun happens in the world, let me know. I'm happy to come talk about it.
Great. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Kim B. Davis show. I hope that you'll tune in to our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.